Mama Murdered a Podcast. I'm your host, AB. And this week on Mama Murdered a Podcast, we're covering the case of Denise Huskins and Aaron Quinn. And I know that last week I said that we were going to be diving into Zack, Bowen, and Addie Hall this week, but this is who I am as a human, and you all accept that, so it's great. Actually, I watched the Netflix documentary on this case over the weekend, and then I remembered that this case even existed, which then took me down a rabbit hole, and here we are. So we will eventually get to Zack Bowen and Addie Hall, but it just won't be this week like I thought. With that being said, this is the craziest survival story that I have ever heard. And I'm also able to tell this story from the perspective of both of the victims because they were both involved and survived. Which that's pretty cool because we don't really get that often. And before we get started, if you don't follow me on social media, then you should. You definitely should. You can see the weekend trip that me and my husband took for our anniversary, birthday, Valentine's Day, whatever, birth anniversary. Or at least that's what we call it. Because when I tell you we saw some funny shit, I mean that with my whole chest, and you just have to go find it and watch it. But okay, enough about me. Just go follow me, laugh at my life with me, and with all that being said, and without further ado, let's get it. This is definitely going to be a two-parter, and I should be able to wrap it up next week with no problem, so let's jump into it. So, a little background on Denise and Aaron before we jump straight into what happened. Denise and Aaron met in June of 2014 after Denise moved to Northern California. She made the move to do a 9-month physical therapy residency at Kaiser Hospital in Vallejo, California. Both Denise and Aaron were physical therapists, and once Denise made the move for her residency, that meant that she and Aaron would be working together in the same facility. They were both passionate about their jobs as physical therapists, and they had an instant connection. But Aaron was in a relationship and engaged to another woman that they also worked with at the same facility. This woman who Aaron was involved with was referred to as Jennifer in the book that Denise and Aaron later wrote together about their incident, and it was clearly stated that Jennifer is not her real name, but just an alias. So we're going to refer to her as Jennifer too. Because why the hell not? Aaron and Jennifer were engaged to be married, but they had kind of called things off recently because of some infidelity on Jennifer's part. And even though Aaron and Jennifer weren't exactly dating, they did still live together in the same house. But Aaron and Jennifer were sleeping in separate bedrooms, and they were trying to kind of figure out if they really wanted to work things out, or just call it quits. But eventually, over time, Jennifer did move out of the house that she and Aaron shared together, and then a little while later, Aaron and Denise started dating. Now, after Jennifer moved out, Aaron and Denise spent most of their nights together. They were kind of inseparable, except for the times that Aaron and Denise decided to try to take a break from one another, just long enough to let Aaron sort through his broken heart and his unsure feelings. But in their book, Victim F, Denise says that those breaks, apart from one another, never lasted longer than a day or two. That either Aaron would start missing Denise and ask her to come back, or Denise would start missing Aaron and ask him to meet up. Either way, they spent nearly every night together after they started dating, even though things were kind of weird between Denise, Aaron, and Jennifer because they all worked together. Denise and Aaron still managed to make things work, at least until Denise learned that Aaron was texting and communicating with his ex-fiancée Jennifer still. This is when Denise decided that they may need a real break from each other and not just a day or two apart. Denise learned about the text and things between Aaron and Jennifer towards the end of February, and this time she wanted to take an actual break from her relationship with Aaron. Well, at least longer than usual. This time she made it about a week. And by the end of March, Aaron asked Denise to come over so they could talk. She agreed and she grabbed them a pizza to eat once she got to Aaron's house. They ate pizza, they talked, and Aaron apologized for still being in touch with Jennifer and for breaking Denise's trust. And they did that kind of talk where you just cry and apologize and kind of dump everything that you've been meaning to say all out into one conversation. And then by the time you're done, you're completely exhausted, like you just ran like an 18-day marathon. And that's exactly how they both felt when they headed up to bed that night. Denise had decided to spend the night again, when earlier she wasn't even sure if she wanted to go to Aaron's. But she went, and they had made up, and all was right with the world as they headed to bed together. So let's talk about this made-for-movie shit that Denise and Aaron experienced after they went to bed. Because this night literally sounds like something that would be made up for a Lifetime movie, but it's not. They actually lived this. This was their life. This actually happened, and it is mortifying. So let me set the stage for you. It's March 23rd, 2015. It's about 1:54 p.m. when a 911 call was placed to Vallejo, California's dispatch. The call was coming from Aaron. And can we just pause right quick in this story to think about how some of the biggest, well-known cases have come out of Vallejo, California? The Zodiac killer started in Vallejo. There was finally an arrest in the 36-year-old cold case and the kidnapping and rape of 6-year-old Jeremy Stoner just last year in Vallejo. And police were able to solve Jeremy's case using the same genealogy testing that they had used to arrest and find the Golden State Killer, Joseph D'Angelo. I feel like there's more cases that I'm not remembering right off the top of my head from Vallejo, but let's keep going. So Aaron explains to the 911 dispatcher that his girlfriend Denise had been kidnapped from inside of his house during the middle of the night, where they were both woken up from a dead sleep and Denise was taken by a gang of men. And to anyone who doesn't know this story, this probably already sounds suspicious, right? Like a woman is just randomly kidnapped in the middle of the night, but her boyfriend is left unharmed and in the house, and is there and able to tell police everything that happened. But just hear me out, because it gets even wilder than this. Because police show up to Aaron's house within a few minutes of the 911 call being made, and when they arrive, Aaron tells police the same thing that he had just tried to explain to the 911 dispatcher. That he and Denise had been asleep in the bed, and that they were both woken up by a number of unknown men, and that Denise had been forced to tie Aaron up with zip ties before she had been taken by these men out of the house. Now, as Aaron is trying to explain to police what he remembers and what happened and in what order, the police kind of cut him off and ask if he's on drugs. And Aaron actually says, actually, yes, I am. This is when Aaron explains that the kidnappers had drugged him, which would also explain why Denise and Aaron had been woken up in the middle of the night, but why it took Aaron until almost 2 p.m. to finally call police and report that Denise had been kidnapped and was missing. Because if Aaron was drugged right before these kidnappers left his house with Denise, then it probably would have taken quite a few hours for Aaron to regain consciousness and for him to be alert enough to realize what was happening and come to the conclusion that he probably needed to call police and report it. So when the police ask if he's on drugs, Aaron says yes, and he explains that he was drugged by the kidnappers. As Aaron is trying to explain what happened, the police officers are walking around the house looking for evidence. And they find a few things that actually back up Aaron's story. There is red tape strewn across the kitchen floor, and it's almost like the red tape was a marker for different areas and parts of the kitchen. And the police officers also noted that there were multiple beer bottles put inside of a box nearby the trash can. And when I say multiple beer bottles, I mean there were a good bit of beer bottles, which led one of the officers to ask Aaron if he had been drinking, and Aaron answered that, he hadn't drank anything since the night before, but that he did usually collect all the beer bottles into one box before he took them out to the recycling can. So, as of now, none of this really looks good for Aaron. His girlfriend is gone, supposedly kidnapped, and there is a noticeable time lapse in the amount of time that it took Aaron to call police and report that there was a kidnapping. And now the officers are finding beer bottles strewn about, and Aaron is telling them that he's been drugged. Now, also in the house, there was a surveillance camera that had kind of been jerry-rigged or taped to the wall, and that surveillance camera was making like a dung, 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 and one of the officers just walks over to the surveillance camera and unplugs it from the wall, probably to stop it from making noise, honestly. After this, Aaron was escorted outside and put in a patrol car to be taken to the police station for blood testing and questioning and to give his statement. And while the officers were driving Aaron to the police station, they were asking if him and Denise had been having any kind of relationship problems, or maybe if they'd been having a fight the night before. And Aaron is truthful, and he does tell him that he and Denise had been on a break because he had been caught texting his ex-fiancée Jennifer. So again, this doesn't really look good for Aaron. But he does explain that he and Denise had talked things out the night before and that they had gone to bed in a really good place. Now, back at the station, Aaron explains what had happened the night before. He recalls their talk, their night, and the fact that the couple had made up and gone to bed. Aaron tells police about how he and Denise were woken up in the middle of the night from a dead sleep and that they were surrounded by a few different men. Aaron tells the officers that these intruders all had guns, and he and Denise both later recall that they could see multiple red dots from multiple guns, which would be the gun lasers shining on the walls all around them. And as I've already said, this is a survival story, so thankfully both Denise and Aaron are still here to retell their own story. So we do get to hear a lot of how both Aaron and Denise viewed things that were happening as they were happening. And we also know a lot about what they remember about this night. Aaron tells the officers that when he and Denise were first woken up, that the intruders had woken them both up by saying, "Wake up, this is a robbery, we're not here to hurt you." And that they said this 4 or 5 times over and over and over again. Aaron explains to the officers how Denise was ordered to tie his hands and feet together by the intruders. And I'm just going to recap what happened on this night after Aaron and Denise woke up. I'm going to use their own words, and then we'll jump back to the police station and the investigation a little bit later. Because Denise says in the book that she and Aaron wrote called Victim F that the voice kept telling her that she was doing a good job, which she thought was a little weird. It was almost like a gentle touch during such a traumatic scene. The voice kept telling her that she was doing a good job tying Aaron up and that she was doing a really great job staying calm. And he was just saying this over and over again, almost like he was trying not to make Denise and Aaron panic by soothing them and telling them that they were doing good jobs. Denise remembered that the man talking sounded almost robotic, like he was over-enunciating his words and trying to make his voice sound as unrecognizable as possible. Denise says that throughout this short few minutes that somebody's talking, that it was clear that this one man would be the only one doing the talking or giving any direction. The other men that were there never spoke or said a word. And Denise and Aaron both refer to this one man who did most of the talking as just the voice. So that's also what we'll be referring to him as, would be just the voice. Denise was forced to tie Aaron's hands and wrists together, and from here Denise says that she was helped off of the bed and she was laid down in a closet. After the intruders had Denise in the closet, they also put Aaron in the closet beside of her. And while they're both laying on the closet floor, the intruder starts pulling these blacked out swim goggles over Aaron and Denise's eyes. And even during this, Denise later recalls in her book that when the man was trying to put the swim goggles over her head, that he was trying to be like super gentle and trying not to pull her hair. Which I feel like this is almost as weird as him telling Denise that she's doing a good job tying Aaron up and that she's doing a good job staying calm. Like, why would this intruder care about pulling her hair to put swim goggles on when they're in her house in the process of doing something criminal? And these swim goggles were your regular basic swim goggles with black duct tape across the lenses. So, just something to block their eyes instead of a blindfold that could probably be manipulated. They used swim goggles. And Denise says it perfectly in her book. She says that this was super eerie because the calmness and the gentleness didn't match the amount of danger that she felt like they were in. If someone is willing to break into your house in the middle of the night, then they're willing to do a lot more than that most of the time. Now, after the intruders got the goggles on Denise and Aaron's heads, they then put headphones over their ears. And I'm assuming it would have to be the kind of headphones that go over top of your head and cover your ears completely, because I just don't see the intruders trying to put an AirPod inside of somebody's ear. That would get awkward real quick, I think. But regardless, once the headphones are on both of their heads, they can hear what sounds like wind chimes playing through the headphones. After a few seconds of just the wind chime noise, a voice comes over the headphones and it says to stay calm. Now, Denise recalls in her book that this voice sounded very clearly like it had been digitally altered in some way or another. Now, the recording plays and it tells Denise and Aaron both to stay calm, and then the recording says that no one is there to hurt or kill anyone, and that they're only there purely for financial reasons. The audio keeps playing, and it says that a medical professional would be coming in to check their vitals, and once their vitals had been checked, they would be given a mixture of different drugs, including NyQuil and diazepam. The recorded voice then says over the headphones that if Denise and Aaron refuse to take these medications orally, then they'll just inject them into them. Denise remembers that she was kind of thinking through her options when she heard that they would either be forced to swallow these medications or they would be injected to them. Either way, they were going to have to take them. And she also remembered thinking that these men had done too much planning for her and Aaron to be able to, talk their way out of the situation. And she also thought that it would be kind of pointless to try to fight and refuse to take the drugs because they'd already told them that they could either take them willingly or they would inject them. Either way, they're taking them. And she says that she remembers consciously thinking that she would have to just take whatever they gave her and that she would just try to fight off the side effects of drowsiness and fatigue. Now, when this medical professional, quote unquote, comes back in to where Denise and Aaron are still laying in the closet, it turns out that it's the same man who they had deemed the voice. But he didn't just check their vitals, though. He also asked them a lot of questions about their medical history. He asked them both if they have any allergies to any medications that they're aware of. And Denise and Aaron both answer the questions that, quote unquote, this voice, this man, who they've deemed the voice, was asking. After these questions are asked by the voice and answered by Aaron and Denise, the headphones plays another recording that tells Denise and Aaron that the intruders are going to be asking them a series of questions about their bank accounts and their finances. But before this man called the voice asks any banking or financial questions, he comes back into the closet that Denise and Aaron are in, and he helps Denise up and he tells her that he's going to move her to the quote-unquote router room. Which, that just made Denise believe that this wasn't this man's first time inside of Aaron's house, because the internet router wasn't in the living room like it is in most houses. The router in Aaron's house was inside of one of the spare bedrooms, and it wasn't like there was just one spare bedroom in Aaron's house. There were actually 3 spare bedrooms. They would have had to have known which room the router was in. Denise is helped up to her feet by the man that they referred to as the voice, and he helps Denise hop her way into the master bathroom. I'm sorry, bedroom, not bathroom. Because the intruders had made Denise tie Aaron up, and the man that she calls the voice is the one that tied Denise up. So her hands and wrists are bound together too. So Denise hops out of the master bedroom while the voice is helping to try to keep her stable and upright. Which is another one of those weird things, it's like he's helping her and he's trying to be so gentle. And it's just weird. So Denise is made to hop her way into a different room, and the voice helps her onto the ground, and then he puts another set of headphones on Denise's ears. And this time it's a different recording that plays through the headphones. This time the recording tells Denise that these men are going to ask her a series of questions, and it also says that if the voice thinks or feels like Denise is lying, that they will either tase Aaron or cut him on the side of his face. And if they feel like she's telling them the truth, then she will be rewarded by being able to stay in the same room as Aaron after they're done with their questioning. And Denise remembers thinking to herself that the recordings aren't matching up with the events that are actually taking place. Like, she and Aaron hadn't actually ever even been asked those financial questions like the first recording had said. And then the second recording says that they'd be separated from one another if they lied, but again, they hadn't actually been asked any questions to answer to lie about, but they were already being separated. Now, Aaron has played this same recording, but in a different room, and he also remembers thinking how weird it is that they would play these recordings, but then how the recordings weren't matching up to what was happening, because just like Denise, Aaron's also thinking about why they would have separated them from each other when the voice hadn't asked them any questions yet. So they hadn't even been given the option to lie about something yet because they haven't asked them any questions like the first and second recording said. The voice asked Denise where her phone is, and he asked what her passwords to her phone is, what her iTunes login information is, and before the voice takes her phone, he asked Denise if there's anything on her phone that she wouldn't want Aaron to see. And again, Denise is like, this is so fucking weird. But she answers, and she's like, no, there's nothing on my phone that I wouldn't want Aaron to see. And then she can hear the voice talking to Aaron in the next room. After Denise hears the voice asking Aaron the same kinds of questions, the voice tells Aaron a street address and asks if that's where he grew up. Aaron did in fact grow up at that address, and his parents still lived at that house, which kind of comes across as a threat, just a threat that wasn't actually said out loud, because they would have had to have known that his parents still lived there, which seems slightly threatening. The voice then comes back in to let Denise know that he was going to be helping her downstairs and into the living room now. Now, this time the voice just kind of picks Denise's body up and he carries her downstairs and sits her down on the couch in the living room. And of course, as you've probably already guessed, the voice sits Denise down on the couch so gently, as if he's trying not to break like a fragile doll or something. When the voice sits Denise down on the couch, he asks her if she's comfortable, which again, she found this super weird, but she was freezing. So she asked the voice if he could please cover her up with a blanket, and she just explains to him that she's freezing cold. And the voice does exactly as Denise asked of him. He throws a blanket on top of her, and it's a throw blanket that is normally on the back of Erin's couch. So he throws that over Denise's body, and he even makes sure to, tuck her feet in so that her feet weren't cold. And then he asks her, is that better? And she says, yeah. So after the voice covered Denise up with the blanket, he walks back upstairs, and Denise can hear what sounds like the voice asking Erin a multitude of different questions. She can't really make out what they're saying. She can just hear the voices in the house upstairs somewhere. And a few minutes later, the voice walks back downstairs and tells Denise, quote, "We have a problem. This wasn't meant for you. This was meant for Jennifer." Which, if you'll remember, Jennifer is Erin's ex-fiance's name. This is what the voice had been asking Erin about when Denise was downstairs on the couch but couldn't hear them enough to make out what they were saying. He had actually been asking Erin if Denise and Jennifer looked a lot alike, and they did. They were both really pretty, and they both had long blonde hair. Erin says that once he knew that the intruders had intended on Jennifer being their victim, that his mind immediately went to a police officer who Jennifer had been having an affair with when they were together. There wasn't anyone else that Erin could think of that would go to these lengths to break into his house about Jennifer, who hadn't lived there in months, besides that police officer. And Jennifer and that police officer had been having an affair that stretched out over the course of 2 years. So, it almost makes sense. At least more sense than complete strangers going through all this trouble for his ex. The voice then asked Erin what his plans were supposed to be for the next couple of days. And they ask if anyone's supposed to be coming over for a visit or if anyone's supposed to be stopping by for any reason. And Erin says in his book that he and Denise wrote that he thought about telling the voice that his brother was supposed to be coming over to stay a few nights because Erin's brother was an FBI special agent. But he kind of figured that these men had done enough research that they would know if that was true or not, and it wasn't true. Erin's brother wasn't supposed to be coming to stay a few days. So Erin decided to just stick with telling them the truth. And he tells them that besides work, he didn't really have any plans and that he wasn't expecting any visitors. Now, back downstairs, as soon as the voice tells Denise that this wasn't meant for her, that it was meant for Jennifer, he tells her that they've come up with a different plan now. Now the plan is that they're going to take her and hold her for 48 hours while Erin comes up with the money that they want in return for her ransom. And that once they get the money, she would be returned safely. The voice then tells Denise that they're going to put her into the trunk of Erin's car and that they're going to drive her to a secondary location that's hours away from Erin's house. And then he says that they'll return her as soon as they get their money. So, easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? What? The way he's telling her, this is what we're going to do, this is the plan. He's asking her to go to Cracker Barrel or something. But Denise knows that there's really not another option, and she's also trying to fight the effects of the NyQuil and diazepam and whatever else they'd made her take earlier. So, she just says okay after the voice tells her what the plan is. She's tied up, so she can't really fight back, and it's in the middle of the night, so no one is awake to see or hear what's happening. So she really couldn't do anything besides agree, if we're being honest. She had no choice but to agree with whatever this man said. When the voice had been upstairs with Erin the last time, he had also informed Erin that the group had decided to go through with their original plan, even though they had mistaken Denise for Jennifer. And the voice even tells Erin that going through with their original plan will allow them time to perfect their craft and to practice different protocols and strategies. And then this is when the voice informed Erin that he would have to pay $15,000 in order to get Denise back, and that they would be taking Denise in his car and keeping her for 48 hours to give him the time to come up with the $15,000. And it's then that another set of headphones was put over Aaron's ears, and throughout the entire recording, Jennifer's name is used. Aaron realizes that this recording was specifically tailored and made for him and Jennifer. That this wasn't just a recording that they used for everybody. Now, the recording goes on to explain to Aaron that there are sections of the downstairs area that are marked with red tape, and that he is not to leave those boundaries that are marked with the red tape. The recording also informs Aaron that the men have installed cameras downstairs and that they can see him everywhere within those barriers that have been marked off with the tape. And then they even use examples of other kidnapping experiences to tell Aaron that the cameras are really high tech and that they'll still work even if he turns the heat in his house up super high. The recording explains that one of their other victims had tried to alter the functions of the camera by turning up the heat in their house and that it didn't work. The audio recording also tells Aaron that these men will keep up with Aaron and Denise long after they return Denise home, and well after Aaron pays the $15,000. And it even tells Aaron about a woman who moved all the way across the country in hopes that they wouldn't find her, but it says that they left her a pie with a note on her doorstep at her new house, just letting her know that they would always find her. So this kind of makes it seem like this is something that they've done multiple times before, which kind of gives Aaron the hope that maybe they do just want his money. Maybe they will return Denise if he just pays them. The recording tells Aaron that the plan for him is that he will call out of work and tell him that he's sick, and that under no circumstances is he to contact authorities. The voice on the recording explains that Aaron is to use Denise's phone to text their job and to tell them that she's had a family emergency and that she won't be back into work for the rest of the week. Now, back downstairs where Denise is, the voice gathered up her overnight bag that she'd brought with her to Aaron's house, and he tells Denise that he's going to take her bags with her. The voice helps Denise up off the couch, and he walks her towards the door to where Aaron's car is. Denise had already heard the men outside move her car out of the driveway and somewhere else, and the voice had already told her that they were going to be putting her into the trunk of Aaron's car to take her to the next location. Now, before the voice guides Denise to the door and out into the trunk of Aaron's car, Denise asks the voice if she can use the restroom before they go, and he agrees. He guides her to the restroom and closes the door and tells her that he wants to give her privacy. Now, as soon as Denise is finished using the restroom, the voice picks her up again and carries her into the garage. Once they're in the garage, the voice places Denise into the trunk of Aaron's car, and she can feel a comforter underneath her body, which made her think that the voice had taken the thick blanket off of one of the beds upstairs just to make the trunk more comfortable for her to lay in, which again is just so weird. Before the voice can shut the trunk, Denise asks if she can take the blanket off the couch since she's still cold. And this is when the voice tells Denise that he'll grab the blanket, and then he tells her that they're all wearing wetsuits, so he keeps forgetting about how cold it is. Which, why would they be wearing wetsuits? I'm not sure. Maybe they were thinking that this would be a good way to keep their DNA off of things inside the house. But I don't know, though. Now, at some point, I guess before the men left with Denise, but after they'd already put her in the trunk of the car, the voice went back upstairs and tried to carry Aaron downstairs to put him on the couch. And they were going to put him on the couch so that he would be left inside of the barriers where the tape was marked off, where they would be able to see him on the cameras inside the house. So once they put him on the couch, he wasn't allowed to go back upstairs or to any other room in the house that was marked off with this red tape. Now, Aaron even says in their book that the voice had to cut his ankles free because he couldn't carry Aaron down the stairs. And Denise had tried to leave the ties on his wrist loose enough for him to, get free. But he says that he knew if he tried to free his wrist that he wouldn't be able to fight back. So this man is trying to carry Aaron down the stairs, can't do it, so he has to cut his ankles free and make him walk. And Denise had left his wrist just a little loose. But Aaron says that he was already fighting back the drugs that they'd given him, and that the voice was kind of holding him upright going down the stairs, kind of like you would in the way that you would hold your buddy up when they've had one too many drinks during a night out. So there's no way he's fighting back. He wouldn't stand a chance. So once Aaron gets downstairs, he immediately hears a noise coming from the living room. And it's making like a dung, dung, dung sound. Aaron knew that this was the camera making the noise, and he asked if the camera's going to make that noise the whole time. And the voice explains that it will, but only because they weren't able to route the camera feed through the router. So they had to run it through the Wi-Fi instead. But he says that the sound of the beeping should stop once the camera's completely loaded and connected to the Wi-Fi. And I just think it's so weird how this man is kind of like apologetic and worried about their comfort, although he's kidnapping and tied them up. And I also want to remind you that Aaron is telling the police all of this information from his perspective. This will be very important later on during the investigation, but I wanted to try to give you a play-by-play of what Aaron and Denise were going through on the night before the investigation. Because, spoiler alert, the police did not believe Aaron's story in the slightest. They thought that he and Denise had kind of curated this entire story to sound like the movie Gone Girl that had recently been released with Ben Affleck, which is insane. Who is making something like this up besides Sherry Papini's ass? Nobody. That's who. Nobody. Anyways, let's get back to what is happening at Aaron's house. So the voice tells Aaron that he's going to duct tape his ankles back together, because remember, he had to cut the zip ties so that Aaron could walk himself down the steps because the man couldn't carry him. And he tells Aaron that both his and Denise's phones are on the kitchen table along with a pair of scissors. And that in the morning, Aaron can cut himself free and head to the bank to make one transaction a day of $7,500 for 2 days. And he instructs Aaron to do it in 2 transactions of $7,500 so that the amounts wouldn't be over $10,000, so the bank wouldn't have to alert the IRS about the transactions. The voice sits Aaron down on the couch and tells him that they will send him the location of his car in the morning so that he can go pick it up. Because remember, that right now they have Denise in the trunk of Aaron's car. Now, the voice tells Aaron not to do anything until the morning. And I just want to throw this out here because it doesn't seem like this interaction has taken very long, but these men have been inside of Aaron's house for a couple of hours at this point. And Denise and Aaron were both given NyQuil, diazepam, and whatever else sedative concoctions they made. They had been given all these drugs way earlier. And they've both just been fighting sleep since then. So now they have Aaron on the couch, and Aaron also asked the voice for a blanket. He had been in his underwear the entire time and laying on the tile in the bathroom floor. So he was also freezing cold. And again, the voice tells Aaron that he'll absolutely get him a blanket, and he also tells Aaron that he keeps forgetting how cold it is because they're all wearing wetsuits. The voice tells Aaron that this will all be over soon. Before Aaron hears the voice tell Denise that he's going to close the trunk now, he hears Denise say okay, and Aaron can hear the noise of the trunk being shut. As Aaron sits in silence listening to his car drive off with Denise in the trunk of it, he replayed all of the things that he had noticed up until this night, and he thought about how he had been trying to convince himself that he wasn't crazy. He says in the book that he and Denise wrote that for months before Denise was kidnapped, that he would come home and feel like things had been moved, even just a centimeter. Or how when he was home, he felt like he was always being watched. And Aaron even says that his front door alarm sensor started going off all of the time, even when he wasn't home, for absolutely no reason. And the alarm company could never explain what was making it go off. He would also remember how he would always see a glare from like a glass coming through his bedroom window, like what happens when a watch face gets hit by the sunlight. But he said he never really thought about it too much or paid it too much attention. But he talks about how it makes so much sense now, looking back at all those really small, minor things, now that these men had come into his house, taken Denise, and tied him up. Once Aaron hears the car drive off, he uses the arm of the couch to maneuver his head to push the swim goggles off of his face. And when he looked over at the clock, he could see that it was about 5 a.m. Aaron says that the last thing that he remembered was thinking to himself that he needed to try to stay awake. But that was never going to happen. Aaron was woken up a little while later by the alarm on his phone going off that normally alerts him to get up and get ready for work. Aaron remembered that he had been instructed to call into work, which he did. Aaron is also able to get his wrist free of the zip ties because thank God Denise left them loose enough for him. and he calls his boss. He leaves a voicemail saying that he's sick and that he isn't going to make it into work today. Then he staggered around a little to the table to get Denise's phone. Aaron is very much still in a drugged state, and he sends a text to Denise's boss. He tries his best to make the text sound like it come from Denise herself. He types a text message out to her boss and explains that there was a family emergency that was going to have her out of work for the whole rest of the week. Denise's boss sends back an encouraging text that says something along the lines of like, if you need anything, just let me know. We'll see you when you get your things straightened out. Family first. Whatever, something like that. Aaron manages to call out for work for both he and Denise, but he can't seem to keep his eyes open still. He wakes up a few times, sees the time, and then falls right back asleep. Now, when he does finally wake up, it's early into the afternoon, and he says that he still feels loopy and super drugged. But he does manage to get to the kitchen table to cut the duct tape off from around his ankles. And as soon as he moved, the camera started making that beeping noise again. The diarrhea from the sedatives hit Aaron pretty quick, but luckily the small half bathroom was one of the spots that was safe for Aaron to go in. He uses the restroom, makes him some coffee, changes his clothes, and prepares to head to the bank to pull the money out that the kidnappers wanted. Aaron waits for the text to come through from the kidnappers to let him know where his car is and what he's supposed to do next. Finally, a text message does come through, and it's from one of those free texting apps where the phone numbers are like randomly generated and not assigned to a person through a phone company. The text message says, acknowledge that you have received this message to the email provided. And Aaron immediately sends an email to the email address that the voice had told him that he would need to remember for communication purposes earlier before he'd taken Denise. And it's not funny, but it is kind of funny now just because Aaron and Denise are okay. But the kidnappers kind of confused themselves, and they weren't sure if Aaron was supposed to be communicating and responding through text message or through email. And finally, the kidnappers just got to a point where they were like, fuck it, we'll just keep using this email address to talk. Forget about the text messages. So, the voice tells Aaron through email that Denise is alive and that she's fine. Then the voice emails and tells Aaron to take out $8,500 from his bank account, and then he'll need to take out another $8,500 through a cash advance on his credit card so that it doesn't have to be reported to the IRS, yada, yada, yada. But I just want to say this. I'm not real smart. I'm not good at a lot of things. But $8,500 and $8,500 would make $17,000, not $15,000 like they said. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's either that or someone can't count. Now, the next email, they tell Aaron that Denise will be returned once they choose a time and place for Aaron to drop the money off. But it's funny because in the book, Aaron's like, wait, how the hell do I even get a cash advance on my credit card? Somebody's going to have to walk me through how to even do that. And he tells the kidnappers this. Aaron says that his parents had money when he was a kid, but that they didn't spoil him, but that he never really had to worry about money as an adult either. He was pretty good at managing his money and had never had to take out a cash advance on his credit card. So he has no idea how to even do this. So the kidnappers explain to Aaron that he can reach out to Chase Bank and ask if a cash advance is possible on his credit card. And the kidnappers even tell Aaron that if Chase Bank asks what the money's for, that Aaron needs to tell them that it's for a used ski boat. So that's what Aaron does. And when he calls, Chase Bank tells Aaron that he can get a cash advance and that he can get as much as $3,520. Aaron emails the kidnappers to let them know that he's only going to be able to get $3,520 from a cash advance on his credit card. And as Aaron waited for a response, he realizes that the voice had told him that the camera would stop beeping once it was fully connected to his Wi-Fi. But it hadn't stopped beeping since he'd woken up. And it had been beeping before he'd went to sleep, too. It had actually never stopped beeping. And then Aaron realizes that the kidnappers should have been able to see him responding to their first few emails and texts when they weren't sure which way they were wanting to send their communications through. And this is when it dawns on Aaron that the kidnappers can't actually see him on the camera, or they wouldn't have sent a text saying respond ASAP when he sent an email instead of a text on the first message that they sent to him. So for whatever reason, the camera didn't actually connect, and that meant that they couldn't see Aaron live on camera. The voice had told Aaron that they installed a monitoring software on his phone that would alert them immediately if 911 was called. So Aaron decides to call his brother Ethan instead of calling 911. And Aaron's brother, Ethan, is probably a good choice of somebody to call because he is an FBI special agent. So Aaron calls his FBI special agent badass brother instead of calling 911. And Aaron's brother Ethan didn't answer the cell phone, which Aaron said is normal, that Ethan doesn't really answer his personal phone during work hours. So Aaron opts to try to call his sister-in-law and Ethan's wife instead. Ethan's wife did answer when Aaron called, and Aaron whispered to her, letting her know that he needs Ethan to call him immediately. Aaron even briefly tries to explain to his sister-in-law that men broke into his house, that they kidnapped Denise for ransom, and Aaron's sister-in-law is obviously confused, but she does exactly as Aaron asked. It was just a few seconds after Aaron hung up with Ethan's wife that Ethan was calling Aaron back. Aaron's brother tells him that it's probably his best and only option is to hang up the phone and call 911 so that everything is done properly and documented properly. Aaron's brother tells him that he'll be there as soon as he can get there, but he also says he needs to hang up to call 911. Aaron does, and he gives the 911 dispatcher a brief rundown of everything we've gone over when we were first starting about this case. When police show up, it's Officer Coelho and Officer Garcia, and they ask him all the things we've already mentioned about the beer bottles, the officer unplugging the surveillance camera, asking if he was on drugs. All of these things happen at this point. Officer Coelho asks Aaron to walk outside and sit with him on the front step. Shortly after Aaron gets outside, his brother Ethan pulls up. But Aaron's only given a brief minute to kind of give Ethan the rundown on what happened. Now, before Officer Garcia takes Aaron to the station for blood samples and to get his statement, he asked Aaron if he would be willing to sign a waiver that would voluntarily give police permission to search his house. And of course, Aaron agrees and signs the paper. Officer Garcia allows Aaron to sit in the front seat of his patrol car on the way to the station. And after Officer Garcia is asking Aaron if he and Denise were fighting, and Aaron explains the problems that they had, and that they had been having, over the course of time about Jennifer, he tells Officer Garcia about the talk that he and Denise had had the night before. And Aaron knew that this didn't look good for him, but he was sure that there was plenty of evidence to prove what he was saying. And the police were already searching his house, so he was sure that they'd find everything they needed to prove what he was saying. So Officer Garcia gets Aaron to the police station, and he sits him down in an interrogation room where Aaron is being watched by another camera, but this time by police. Officer Garcia brings Aaron a bottle of water while Aaron waits on the detectives to come in to get a statement. And the two detectives that came in were Detective Robert Greenberg and Detective Terry Poser. They come into the interrogation room for a few minutes, and they ask Aaron if he would be willing to give them a blood sample, and of course Aaron agrees. They then ask Aaron if they can take his clothes for evidence, and again, Aaron agrees, even though he tried explaining to both of the detectives that he had been in his underwear for the majority of the time that these things were happening. And it was at 3:34 p.m. that a lab tech brings another waiver in for Aaron to sign. So now it's been more than 12 hours since this whole nightmare started for Aaron and Denise, and nobody has even started looking for Denise yet. That same lab tech comes in to get pictures of Aaron's arms, legs, ankles, face, neck, etc., etc. And she also asked for DNA swabs of the insides of Aaron's jaws along his cheeks. Then the lab tech asks Aaron to stand up so that they can take pictures of his clothing on his body before they take them for evidence. They have Aaron strip down one piece of clothing at a time until he is down to nothing but his bare ass. Then they give Aaron an old pair of linen pajamas from a state prison. Aaron later says that the outfit that they gave him to wear looked identical to the striped prison suit that the character on Monopoly wears. Afterwards, Aaron gets dressed in his state-issued prison outfit, and he sits down with detectives Greenberg and Poser to go through a play-by-play of the timeline of events that took place in the middle of the night. Aaron recounts everything that he can remember and gives the detectives all of the passwords and passcodes to anything on his phone and anything that they may even need possibly need to access. After the questioning, Aaron's kind of left just sitting in the interrogation room by himself for over an hour. They bring him some snacks, and Aaron says that the whole time he's kind of wondering what tactics the police are thinking about using to try to draw the kidnappers back out. He wonders if they're going to use his phone to try to communicate with the kidnappers and pretend to be him, or if they have something a little more clever up their sleeve. But Detective Matt Mustard comes in to question Aaron, and he shows Aaron a photocopy of Jennifer and Denise's driver's license pictures. And he asks Aaron to verify that these women are his current girlfriend and his ex-fiancé, and Aaron tells him, yeah, that's correct. Detective Matt Mustard asks Aaron to recount everything that had happened, frame by frame, again. And this is kind of confusing for Aaron, because he knows that he had just spent the better part of 2 hours recounting everything that happened to Detectives Greenberg and Poyser. But Aaron kind of hopes that maybe they're doing this to see if maybe one detective picks up on something crucial that maybe another detective missed, which is good logic on Aaron's part, but the longer that Detective Matt Mustard sits with Aaron and questions him, the questions become more hostile, and it becomes abundantly clear that Detective Mustard is more concerned with what Denise and Aaron had been arguing about the night before they made up, and he didn't really seem to be worried about the actual crime. And that just becomes even more clear when Detective Mustard tells Aaron that he hasn't been to his house yet. So he's asking him all of these questions without ever having been to the actual crime scene. So understandably, Aaron was having a hard time understanding and trying to figure out what in the hell was the point in him telling the same story over and over and over again. And then it happened. Detective Mustard finally just comes out and tells Aaron that he doesn't believe anything that he's saying. Detective Mustard says that he believes that Aaron and Denise got into an argument that night, and that Aaron killed Denise, and that he made up this convoluted story to try to cover up the murder. Obviously, as we know, Aaron wasn't a murderer, and Denise wasn't dead. But Detective Mustard goes on to tell Aaron that, quote-unquote, no frogmen in wetsuits came into your house and took your girlfriend. And Aaron is essentially actually, that's exactly what happened, bro. Aaron tells Detective Mustard that he's sitting in the police station because he doesn't have anything to hide, and because he does want to help to find Denise. Detective Mustard tells Aaron that he thinks that it's awfully funny how there haven't been any other communications made by the kidnappers since Aaron called 911, and how the kidnappers haven't reached out for their ransom money still, and just all of these things. Then Detective Mustard tells Aaron that there's really nothing else that backs up the story that Aaron was telling. Which, obviously, he hasn't been to Aaron's house to see the evidence that does back up what he's saying. If he had gone to the house, which is the actual crime scene, he would have obviously seen taped off parts of the house that were marked safe for Aaron to travel through and places that weren't. Obviously, he hadn't been to Aaron's house and seen anything, or he would have known that there are actually plenty of things that backed up what Aaron was saying. Kind of like the comforter that the voice had taken out and into the trunk of Aaron's car to make the trunk more comfortable for Denise. That would have been missing. Aaron's car probably would have been caught on a lot of traffic cameras with somebody else driving. There's literally so many things that could verify that if they would have just taken the time to verify it. Now, at one point, Detective Mustard asked Aaron if these men swam in wearing their wetsuits to kidnap Denise. And I think that's about the time I would have lost my shit on this Detective Mustard's ass. Mustard tells Aaron that it's ridiculous to think that someone would have pre-recorded statements to play through headphones for him and Denise. And Aaron tells him that he knows that his story sounds completely insane, but that it's all true. And then Detective Mustard tells Aaron that they'd found blood inside of his house, which was news to Aaron, because to his knowledge, no one had been hurt or cut or bled at all during the kidnapping. And Aaron is sure that he would have heard Denise scream or yell or cry out in pain or something if the kidnappers had drawn blood from her at any point in the night. So now Aaron's just racking his brain trying to think of where they would have found blood and what it would have been from. He even thinks back to a few weeks ago when he'd cut himself playing basketball, and he wonders if the blood they found was from when the scab fell off. And even that would have been a super small amount of blood, but luckily for Aaron, he doesn't actually say any of these thoughts out loud. But then Detective Mustard says that the blood found makes him think that Denise was probably already dead when Aaron got rid of her body. Y'all, Denise is alive, and they're not looking for her. Not one single officer is looking for her. And Aaron knows that this entire theory is A, wrong, and B, doesn't even make sense. Why would someone demand a ransom for a dead person? This is not John Bonet's case all over again. And then Detective Mustard tells Aaron, quote, I'm a puzzle maker, and I put a lot of puzzles together. So now I get out my puzzle pieces, and I start figuring out, how do I make it so you look like a monster? I'm sorry, what? Detectives are supposed to let the crime scene speak to them. They're not supposed to go into it with some preconceived notion of what they believe happened. But Detective Mustard's biggest selling point for believing that Aaron killed Denise was the fact that Aaron had waited so many hours to call 911 after Denise had been kidnapped. But obviously, Detective Mustard is not thinking about the cocktail of sedation medication that Aaron was forced to take, and he's also not accounting to the time that it would take to sleep off that amount of medication either. And Detective Mustard is a snark son of a bitch too. He asked Aaron at one point during this investigation if he watched the Lacey and Scott Peterson case unfold. Because that case was also out of California, but it was in Modesto. And Aaron's like, yeah, I saw it unfold. Why? Detective Mustard tells Aaron that that's how people are going to view him. He tells Aaron that he didn't need to know anything about Lacey or Scott or their case to know that Scott is a lying sack of shit. And essentially he says that people are going to think the same exact thing about Aaron. He even goes so far as to tell Aaron that he's so sure that Denise is dead that they're going to go find her body at some point in the near future, and that he's willing to already go to Denise's parents' house to let them know that she's dead. Let me say that again for the people in the back. Detective Mustard tells Aaron that he is so sure that Denise is dead that he is willing to go ahead and tell her parents, family, and friends that they would find her dead body. Which is wild. This is so wild. And what's even wilder than that is that Detective Mustard was never reprimanded for the way that he handled this case. He was instead named Officer of the Year for the year 2015, which was the same year that Denise was kidnapped. But let's put a pin in this investigation interview real quick and jump back to Denise and what's going on with her after she's put into the trunk of the car and driven away from Aaron's house. Denise says in her book that immediately after the trunk was closed that she realized it was going to be really hard to breathe and that she wasn't sure how she was supposed to ride in the trunk of this car for hours and not be able to breathe. She says that she could hear the radio playing in the car as the car backed out of the driveway, and then it was only a few minutes after they backed out of Aaron's driveway that Denise says she could feel the car coming to a stop again. And once the car stops, the trunk opens yet again, and the man is standing over Denise, and he's yelling into the trunk that if she yells or makes noise, that it's gonna get really bad for her. And Denise is just like, I didn't say anything. So the man shuts the trunk. This kind of makes Denise panic a little bit, though, because she hadn't actually made any noise, and the man was already yelling and mad at her. A little while later, the car comes to a stop again, and the trunk opens again. This time, the man that we've just been calling the Voice used a knife to cut the zip ties off of Denise's wrist so that it would be more comfortable for her during the rest of the ride. This is another one of those times where it's like the Voice was really worried about Denise's comfort, even though he's legitimately kidnapping her. Denise is then helped out of the trunk of Aaron's car and put into the trunk of a different car that was parked right beside of where Aaron's car was parked. Denise can hear the Voice taking all of his things out of Aaron's car and putting them into the other car that he has her in the trunk of. After this, the car takes off again. Denise says that it was a lot easier to breathe in the trunk of the second car, but that the exhaust on the car sounded like something that you would hear in a sports car. Denise even says in her book that she thought about trying to pull some Hollywood movie type of shit to try to kick the taillight out or something, but that when the Voice opened the trunk to tell her to stop screaming before, that had been the first time that she had really heard the voice get aggressive, and she wasn't willing to risk it. Denise says that she can feel the car getting up to a higher rate of speed, and she assumes that they're on maybe a freeway or an interstate. Denise goes in and out of sleep during the ride, and she'd been fighting off this sedative cocktail for hours, and her body just finally gave in and went to sleep. She says she's not sure how long they drove for, but that she would wake up every so often and realize where she was and what was happening and what was going on, and then her body would just shut back off and go back to sleep. But the last time that she woke up, it was to the sound of the car turning onto a gravel driveway, coming to a stop. The trunk opens and the voice helps Denise out of the trunk of the car. Denise's hands had been freed when the voice had cut the zip ties off, but her feet were still bound together. And the voice is having trouble getting Denise out of the trunk of his own car, so she tries to help by pulling her body weight up, and the voice picks her up. Then he drops her, y'all. Like, they both fall flat onto the concrete driveway. Denise still had the swim goggles on that had black tape over the lenses, so she still couldn't see, but she could tell that it was daylight outside. The voice tried to pick Denise up again, and he failed yet again. So Denise says in her book that she could feel the voice breathing on her, where they had both just fallen, and that this was the first time that she had been able to gauge that he wasn't as cool, calm, and collected as he might have seemed. Since he couldn't pick her up and carry her, he decided instead that he would just kind of drag her by her feet into the garage. He threw the comforter onto Denise's body, and he tells her that he'll be back, but he has to get everything ready. Denise can hear the voice moving things around in the next room, and she can hear what sounds like the voice scrubbing on something. Denise doesn't know if someone else is in the garage with her or not, but she does say that while she's in there with the comforter on top of her, that she made herself a promise that she would not beg for her life. She would not cry, she would not plead, she would not try to reason with them if they tried to kill her. She says that she wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Denise can then hear footsteps walking towards her, and this is when the voice pulls the comforter off of her and tells her that the bathroom's ready for her. Denise says that she expected violence and aggression, but instead the voice helped her up off the floor pretty gently, and he helped wobble her into the bathroom. The voice takes Denise's hands, which are free and they don't have zip ties on them anymore, and he helps her use her own hands to kind of guide her way around the bathroom. He lets her feel the side of the tub and the toilet, the shower, the knobs for the cold and hot, the shower curtain, the towel, everything that she'll need in the bathroom. But the swim goggles with the tape are still over her eyes. This is when the voice tells Denise that she'll need to shower so that she can wash off all the particles that come from the outside off. And he explains that that's why he was scrubbing the shower and the tub before he brought her into the bathroom. So they really have thought of everything. This shower would also wash off any DNA evidence that may have been transferred to Denise's body during the car ride and during the times that the voice had been trying to pick her up and help her. So the voice tells Denise to shower and to get dressed, and that when she's done, she'll need to knock on the door 3 times because he's going to close the door for her to shower to give her privacy. And he says that they're doing this because he doesn't want to dehumanize her any more than they already have to. Which, how noble of you, sir. That was sarcasm. So he also tells Denise that she will be being watched and she needs to do exactly as he says. So she does. The voice tells Denise not to attempt to try to take the swim goggles off for any reason. Denise says that she fumbled around to fix the water to get it to the right temperature that was comfortable. She says that she felt like no one was in the room with her, but she thought that maybe they had been recording her or watching her on a camera from another room. Denise says that she used the bar of soap that she was given and she tried to wash her body, like the least amount of her body as possible, without setting off alarm bells to anybody that may be watching. So she showers pretty quickly, she gets dressed, and she knocks on the bathroom door 3 times. She says that she could hear movement and commotion coming from a room close by, but after she knocked, nobody ever came to the door. So she knocked on the door again 3 times. The voice finally does come to the door, and he sounded like he was out of breath. He told her that she had showered quicker than what he was expecting, and that the room that he was trying to get ready for still wasn't done. So he wraps the comforter back around Denise's body and he guides her through the house and sits her down on a couch. He tells her not to move, not to speak, and she can hear him walking away. After a few minutes, the voice comes back to get Denise, and he walks her into a different room. She thought maybe he had taken her into a bedroom because she sat down on a mattress. And he tells her that this is where she would be staying until her release. So, at least they still had plans on releasing her. The voice tells Denise where everything in the bedroom is. He tells her that the closet is to her left and that there's a dresser in the room with her and that the top drawer of that dresser, that's where her food and water will be. And then he tells her that her glasses are on top of the dresser, which this would have to be scary to hear. This man is saying that he, for one, knew that she wore glasses, and two, that he had taken the time to look for her glasses before he took her out of Aaron's house, and thirdly, that he had brought the glasses with them throughout 2 different cars and 3 different rooms in this house, just so that he could give them back to her. I don't know, it's all just really weird. I can actually kind of see how the police weren't buying this story when Aaron was trying to explain what happened. Then the voice tells Denise that he's going to be leaving the house for a little while, but that a man that she can call Jay is going to be watching over her while he's gone. The voice tells Denise that Jay probably won't speak to her, but that, he would just check in on her from time to time, and that if Jay does speak to her, that he would sound like your typical black guy, which I'm just going to leave that right there because that sounds racist as fuck. But then the voice tells Denise that it would be in her best interest not to give Jay a reason to speak to her. A short time later, Denise can hear a car driving around the house. Then afterwards, she falls asleep for an unknown number of hours. And by the time she woke up, the voice was back and she'd never even heard, saw, or seen Jay. She was likely asleep the whole time that Jay was watching over her. Now, when the voice comes back into the room with Denise, the first thing he does is apologize to her for yelling at her in the trunk of the car. And he explains that Aaron's steering wheel makes a squeaky noise every time you turn it, and that he thought that noise had been her yelling or screaming from the trunk. And Denise says that she knew exactly what noise he was talking about, and then the voice tells Denise what's going to happen next. He says that Aaron would be given a set of instructions on what to do. Once Aaron did all the things he was supposed to do, that they would drop Denise off either late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. And then the voice kind of explains to Denise what he and his team do, like what their goal and career is. The voice tells her that his team of men are like a company of sorts, and that it's a company that people can hire for financial gain or to settle personal debts. Denise asked the voice to stop telling her information about his business, and when he asked her why, she just tells him that the more she knows about them and what they do, the more likely it is that they have a reason to kill her. Then the voice tells Denise that their goal has never been to kill her, and that all the information that he's given her is okay for her to know. So then the voice goes on to tell Denise more about this group. He says that his group is mostly hired to collect ransom money. They're hired to scare someone into paying a personal debt. I don't know. Denise says the more that this guy talks, the more that she feels like she's learning about him. And she says that he seems like the type that would be awkward and shy in his real and personal life. She also says that she felt like he had studied and practiced how to do and say things that are socially acceptable as a way to just fit in with society. So the voice tells Denise that they're always successful when they're hired to do a job and that they always let their victims go alive. But then the voice tells Denise that they're able to do this so successfully because they watch their victims super closely beforehand and afterwards. Which would explain why Aaron started feeling watched and why he felt like things in his house were being moved, even if it was only centimeters. And also why his door alarm was always going off for what seemed like no reason at all. The voice goes on to tell Denise that by the time they take their victims, that this group of men has already learned everything that they need to know about them. That this group of men has already learned everything that they need to know about their victims. They know who their family is, they know what car they drive, what stores they like to shop at, who their friends are. They know everything. And he also tells Denise that they watch their victims for years afterwards. That their victims are told to never go to the police and to never talk to anyone about what happened to them. Which, this also lines up with what Aaron was told. About the girl moving across the country and them sending her a pie to let them know that they'd found her. The voice even gave Denise that same example about the girl moving across the country. So, they've both been told this same thing and they're in completely separate houses and places. But then he tells Denise that this is the first time that they'd ever gotten it wrong because this attack was never meant for Denise. It was meant for Aaron's ex-fiancée, Jennifer. The voice tells Denise that the screw-up was his fault because this was the first time that he had ever been the lead on a mission, and that it was his job to collect the information and the intel, and that he dropped a ball. And then he dropped a bombshell on Denise. The voice tells Denise that he had been in Aaron's house multiple times over the last couple of weeks, and that he'd mistakenly thought that she was Jennifer because he knew that Aaron and Jennifer had been engaged, and that he'd even found an engagement card in one of Aaron's drawers. But Jennifer still had mail that came to Aaron's address. But this was pretty telling because Denise knew for a fact that it had been over 6 months since Jennifer had gotten one single piece of mail at Aaron's address. So this just kind of validated the length of time that they had been watching her and Aaron for. Which is kind of insane to think about the fact that someone can be watching you for 6 months or longer and you just have absolutely no idea. The voice tells Denise that the last time that she slept over at Aaron's house, which would have been 1 week prior to this, that they had actually been inside of the house with Aaron and Denise, and they were standing right outside of Aaron's bedroom door. He says that that job was called off that night because there were too many police officers in the area. And while the voice is telling Denise all this, she's thinking back to every time she had been at Aaron's house and felt like she was being watched. She had always thought she was just being paranoid, but turns out she wasn't. They were actually watching her. And Denise says that she wondered how many times she and Aaron had been asleep, and this group of men had just been standing over them in the middle of the night. Absolutely terrifying. The voice tells Denise that if he would have just checked her wallet the night before, and if he would have seen that she wasn't Jennifer, that none of this would have happened. Like, oh, cool. Good to know. Good talk. Like, why would you even say that to her? After their little talk, the voice takes Denise on a bathroom break, which he would do every couple of hours. And throughout the time that Denise was inside the house, she became more and more sure that it was actually a house. She could, over time, kind of hear the layout of the house. And she says that every time he would take her to the bathroom, that she would hit her thigh in the same spot on the same piece of furniture. And she believed that that piece of furniture was in the dining room and that it was probably the kitchen table. She also thinks that the house may be secluded and off by itself, because the whole time she's there, she says that she doesn't hear any of the hustle and bustle of the city, like no cars driving by, no traffic, nothing. Denise says that she was still pretty groggy and fighting to stay awake from whatever drugs they had made her take, and that throughout the course of the day that she could see the sunlight changing from morning to afternoon to evening through the really small cracks that were missed by the tape on the swim goggles. And she thinks it was in the evening when the voice came back into the room that she was in. She says that she could tell by his footsteps and by his breathing that something was wrong, but she just didn't know what. The voice tells Denise that there's a problem. And Denise's mind immediately went to thinking that maybe something was wrong with Aaron, or maybe he hadn't followed their directions. But instead, the voice tells Denise, quote, "One of us is going to have sex with you." This had to be confusing as fuck for Denise because up to this point, there hadn't been any violence, no torture, no physical attacks, none of that. And this is when the voice explains that since this mission was never meant for Denise, that meant that the organization didn't have anything to hold over Denise's head. So he says that they've come up with a plan, that one of the men is going to quote-unquote have sex with her, aka rape her, and they're going to film it. That way they would have something to use as blackmail. The voice tells Denise that if she goes to the police or if she tells anyone what happened to her, that this video of them raping her would be posted onto the internet for everybody in the world to view. The voice tells Denise that he's not sure who would be the one raping her or how many of them would be raping her, but that they were trying to figure all those details out right now, and he pulls the bedroom door shut behind him. The voice leaves Denise in this room alone to run through the worst and most horrific thoughts that a human can possibly imagine about what's about to happen to her. And after a short time, the voice comes back into the room where Denise is, and he tells her that it's been decided that he will actually be the one to rape her. Since it was his screw up, he's the one that mistook her for Jennifer. He's going to be the one to do it. Then this man-child has the whole ass audacity to tell Denise, "This is more of a punishment for me than it is for you. You did nothing wrong. No shit, Sherlock. And then he tells her that he just proposed to his fiancée 2 weeks ago, and that this recording of him raping her will be used to make sure that their mission goes as planned. He tells her that this recording is going to need to look like consensual sex between a couple, which makes me want to throw up in my mouth. The voice explains that after this is over, he'll have to send the recording to one of his higher-ups who will decide if it looks real enough or not. He tells Denise that he needs time to prep himself, and he tells her that this is going to be really hard for him to go through with before he closes the door again. And this is where we're going to have to pick up next week because this is a lot of information and things are only just getting started. This will be a 2-part episode, I believe. I'm pretty sure I can wrap it up next week. So I'm just going to dig through and find a review of the week to get my brain away from this. And don't forget, if you want your review to be read on the podcast, just leave it either on Apple Podcast or Audible, or I think you can even do it on Facebook now. And I just choose a review randomly every week to read at the end of each episode to just kind of lighten the mood a little bit. So I just ran to Facebook to see if you can leave reviews, and to all the people that left reviews last year in April and July, and I'm so sorry. I did not even realize this was an option on Facebook. So I'm going to pull an older review because I'm just now seeing those. So this one is from April, and it's from August 11th, 2023. And it says, "This is one of my favorite true crime podcasts. Settle in, get comfy, or start that one chore that you've been putting off and listen to the tea of the world. With a variety of subjects and the voice of a Southern belle, you're sure to get all the juicy details here." April, thank you so much. Oh my God, I love y'all. Also, every week I call my kids crotch goblins, and I did not realize that people had other terms. They've been sending them, and I'm going to start using them. This week, I'm going to say, it's that time because I have to go get my twat trophies. And with that, let's do it again. Same time, same place, next Wednesday. See you then.
That's how my mama murdered a podcast.